Today I will explain the types of constructors and constructor overloading in Java using VS Code. First I will cover the theoretical concept of constructors, then I will show you the execution part of constructors in VS Code. So what is a constructor? A Java constructor is a special type of method that is used to initialize an object when it is created. So the main purpose of the constructor is used to initialize the instance variables. So whenever you define a class, inside that you write some variables and we need to give some default values for that, or later on we can give some other values also. So specifically for initializing the instance variables, we do go for a constructor. Now that constructor is been called at the time of creating an object. So it is called when an instance of the class is created. Instance means object. So whenever you are creating an object of a class, then the constructor is getting called. At the time of calling constructor, memory for the object is allocated by using new operator. So whenever you are creating an object and at the time of creating that object, we are calling the constructor, and at the same time the memory is allocated for the object. Every time an object is created using the new keyword. Now new is the keyword, or we call it as a new operator, which is used for allocating the memory. At least one constructor is called. So whenever I'm writing the object creation like class name, object name, assignment operator, new, then the constructor name. So at least one constructor, either it could be a parameterized or non-parameterized constructor, you need to write. So it calls a default constructor if there is no constructor available in the class. If suppose you are not defining any constructor inside a class, then the Java virtual machine is going to call a default constructor automatically. In such case, Java compiler provides a default constructor by default. So you don't specify any constructor in your class, and the compiler work is to create a default constructor and give some default value to a instance variable. Now, what are the rules of a constructor? Now, the first one is the name of the constructors must be same as the class name. So what is the name of the class? The constructor name also should be the same. Second, Java constructors do not have a return type, not even void as a return type. Now the constructors are very similar to the method. When we see the method, we have a return type, we have the method name, we have the parameter list. Now when you go for a constructor, we don't have any return type, not even void, because it's of a class type, but we can have some modifiers, access modifiers like public, private and protected, and we can have the parameter list for that. So we have an access modifier, the constructor name, as well as the parameter list. We don't have any return type. Now there can be multiple constructors. So in one application for one class, we can write multiple constructors. Like we can write a no argument constructor. We can write a list of parameterized constructors in the same class. So if we write like that, then that concept is called as constructor overloading. Now the access modifiers can be used with the constructors. So that's what I was saying. We can write private, public, protected. That modifiers we can write, but we cannot write a return type. Java provides a default constructor that is invoked during the time of the object creation. If you create any type of constructor, the default constructor is not invoked. So suppose in a class you don't write any constructor, but at the time of creating object you are calling a default constructor, because at the time of creating object the constructor is getting called. That is by default syntax, and you have not specified any default constructor in your application, then automatically the compiler is going to take care. If suppose you have written a default constructor and you have written the other type of constructors also, that means you have given the specific constructors you have written, then only those values will be taken. The default constructor with what was created by the compiler is going to get avoided. Now coming to syntax of a constructor. Now this is a class keyword followed by the class name. Then now this class name and this class name is same. And here this is where we write the parameter list, and we don't have any return type. But we can write some access modifiers like public, private, and protected. So here the rule is class name and constructor name need to be same. Now this is called as a no argument constructor, where we don't write any parameter list here. Okay. If you go for parameterized constructor, we write the parameter list here. And if you don't write, it becomes a no argument constructor. Now coming to the types of Java constructor. So we have three. One is default constructor, no arguments constructor, and parameterized constructor. Now coming to the first one, default constructor. See, if you do not create any constructor in the class, Java provides a default constructor that initializes the object. So inside a class, you are not writing any constructor, but at the time of the object creation, the compiler is creating automatically a default constructor, and that initializes the instance variables with some default value. Now coming to the no arguments constructor, the no argument constructor does not accept any argument. So you're writing the constructor externally in your program, but you are not passing any arguments into that. First one says that the default constructor says that you're not writing the constructor at all. But second one says that you are writing a constructor, but you're not having any argument for that particular constructor. Now by using the no argument constructor, you can initialize the class, data members means instance variables, and perform various activities that you want to do on the object creation. So you can give some default values, whatever you want for your instance variables, that you can put into no argument constructor. But in default constructor, we don't have any provision because we don't write. Now coming to the other category, parameterized constructor. A constructor with one or more arguments is called a parameterized constructor. No argument constructor, I said no parameters, no arguments are going to pass, but here parameterized constructors, we are going to pass some parameters now. The parameters are added to a constructor in the same way that they were added to a method. Just declare them inside the parentheses after the constructor's name. So at the time of syntax explanation, I was saying that the constructor is similar to a method, and as the method is accepting parameters, the constructors can also accept parameters. So if the constructor is accepting parameters, then it is called a parameter constructor. Now what is constructor overloading? Now constructor overloading means multiple constructors are written in the class. Like it could be a no argument constructor, or it could be a parameterized constructor with single parameter, one constructor with double parameter, one constructor with triple parameter. So like that you can go on. So if you are having a multiple number of constructors inside a class, then that is called as a constructor overloading, provided the constructors, whatever you are writing, should have a variation in the parameter list. Suppose you have one parameter with integer, then the second constructor could be integer comma float, third constructor could be int comma int. So like that there should be some variation. When you have multiple constructors with different parameters listed, then it will be known as constructor overloading. Now this is the theoretical part. Now I will show you the demonstration of the applications, how to use the types of constructors and also the constructor overloading. So I'll show you into the Visual Studio Code. So just open the Visual Studio Code. You need to have this software with you. So when you type in search, you're going to get like this. Now this is the environment for the Visual Studio Code. Just close the windows which are not applicable. Now here what you need to do here is you need to create one folder so that you can save all your files inside that. In my previous videos, I have clearly mentioned how to create the Java folder and put all the files into that. So here I already have the applications which are created. Now this is one of the folder I have created. So in order to create a folder, we have an option here, new folder. You can click that and write the name of the folder. If you want to create some files inside this, you can create this one, new file. And every file you need to have a Java extension. For all Java application, .java is an extension. Now we'll see what is the default constructor. So I said I'm not going to externally write the default constructor in my application. So here the class name is student, and I'm taking one integer variable, one string variable. So two instance variables have been defined, one ID and one name, and I'm writing one display method and I'm printing the ID value as well as the name value. But here the class is opened here and the method only I've written. But here I have not defined any constructor. So what happens here is if you don't write any constructor, the default constructor is created automatically by the compiler at the time of object creation. Now you can see here we have the main method, and inside the main method we are writing the class name, then object name is S1, then assignment operator new, and now this is called as constructor calling. Now this is calling a default constructor. Now the second object name is S2. Now this one is also been calling a default constructor. So twice we are calling default constructor, but here we are not defined any default constructor. So what happens here is, now here you can see this is the line for object creation. So at the time of object creation, the constructor is getting called and object is created called S1 and also the S2. Now by using these objects, you call S1.display and S2.display. Now what is the answer you are going to get? Because I have not assigned any value for this. Here I cannot do, but here I can do, but here also I am not done. So what is the default value for ID and name we are going to get? Here I am calling twice display method and no values have been assigned. So what the compiler is going to assign, we'll see. Just save and just run the application. Now here you can see 0 and null. So for S1 object, ID is 0 and name is null. For S2 object is also ID is 0 and null. So the compiler is assigning that value automatically. I'm not writing anything, a default constructor. So whenever it is called, 0 and null value has been assigned because 0 for the integer value and null is for the string value it has been given. So if you don't write any constructor, that implies the compiler is going to call the default constructor. It automatically gets created by the compiler itself. Now I'll show for the no argument constructor. Now here the same application, what is the change you need to understand here? Class name I have given student3. Again the ID and name as instance variables. Now this is the constructor. Now earlier program I was not writing this. Student is a class name and the constructor name and class name should be same. And here you can see there are no arguments, empty. So what I can do here is I am taking this instance variable ID and I'm writing 1 and name is unknown I have written. So these are the default values what I'm giving. And this function is same as the previous program, ID and name you're printing. Then the main method. Then this code is also been same. But only the class name is changed as student3. So here I'm creating S1, S2. Now whenever this is called, whenever at the time of creating this one is called student3, now this get executed. Now whenever it is getting executed, the ID value is becoming 1 and name is unknown. Similarly for second object also the same constructor is called. Again its S2 value, S2 ID will be 1 and name is unknown. So if you write like this, then this is called no argument constructor. But in previous program we were not writing like this. So the compiler has created automatic default constructor with giving a 0 and null value for the ID and name. Okay, so just save this program, save and run. So here you can see 1 and unknown for the S1 object, 1 and unknown for the second object. So this is one way. Then I'll show parameterized constructor now. Now here you can see the class name I made as student1, then ID and name same. Now here the constructor name and class name is same, student1, student1. Now here I'm passing parameters. The second program there was no parameters, but here I'm passing one integer, one string. See, this variable name can be anything. It could be I or J. We are not bothered. But the first parameter is integer. The second parameter is a string. Now, whatever the values you are giving here for I and N, that will be initialized to the ID and name. So the I value is been transferred to ID. N value is transferred to N. See, the display method we are not changing. It is same. Now, in the main method, try to understand this line. This one. In the previous two programs, we are seeing that after the class constructor, we are not writing any values. But here I'm writing like one is 101 and one is XYZ. So this is called as parameterized constructor calling because you are passing the values here, two values. Now what happens when you create an object with this constructor is this 101 and XYZ is going to call this constructor. So 101 is going to store in I. XYZ is going to store in N. 101 is an integer, right? It is storing in I. XYZ is a string, it is storing in N value. Now this 101 which was stored in I will be put into ID. XYZ which is put into N will be storing in name. So like that, these values get transferred. For S2, you can see the values are changed. S2, the values are changed like 202 and PQR. Now again, the same constructor is getting called and again the values are assigned. But you need to observe here is this 101 and XYZ is for S1. 202 and PQR is for S2. So if I call S1.display, you're going to get 101 XYZ. S2.display, you're getting 202 and PQR. So these are the values which are passing at the time of calling the constructor. Now here you're calling which type of constructor? Parameterized constructor. So just save the file and run. Now here you can see the output like 101 XYZ for S1 object, 202 and PQR for the second object. Now one more program I'll show for constructor overloading. So already we have seen the definition like one class will holding a multiple number of constructors and the parameters are going to vary it. Now here I have taken one class called S1. The class name is S1 and I'm taking name and age as two parameters, two variables, instance variables, name and age. One is of string type, one is integer. Now this is the no argument constructor because you know the class name and the constructor name should be same and there are no arguments. So I have written this is a no argument constructor without any parameters. Now here this dot name, this one we are taking this dot name initialized with unknown and age is initialized with the 0. Okay, that means for the current object, whichever the object is being invoked, for that it is going to get initialized. This keyword is used to represent the current object. Suppose one time I go for object 1, then that will be taken into consideration. One next time object 2, object 3, like that. So whichever we are invoking or whichever object we are creating, that particular constructor is going to hold that particular value. Now this is a parameterized constructor with only one parameter. Now here you can see the name is nothing but a formal parameter and this name is a instance variable. So both the variable names are same, then I can apply this here and there is no age. So by default that age I'm trying to put for the 0. So this is representing the current object. Now this is trying to remove the confusion like which name, here two names are there. This name is a formal parameter, this name is a instance variable, but we need to give the information to the compiler. So in order to give the information to the compiler that this is an instance variable, we need to prefix this keyword. Now this is one type of constructor. Now one more constructor with two parameters. One is name and age. Then I can give these two are formal parameters. These two are instance variables. So since the name and age, both the variable names are same for instance variables and the formal parameters, I need to prefix this keyword for the instance variables. Otherwise, you get error. So here 3 constructors, one with 2 parameters, one constructor with 1 parameter, one with no argument constructor. So 3 constructors have been defined. So if you write like this concept is called as constructor overloading. Now in the display, I'm trying to print name and age. So this is one class where we are terminating, and the class name is S1. Now I need to write the main class, and the main class name I put as student4. Now in the main method, you can see the first line. If you write like this, it is going to call no argument constructor, okay, where the value is unknown and 0. Then when you write like this, you are giving a x1, it's only one parameter value. So it will call this one, this constructor, where name is being initialized with x1, but the age is still 0 only. Only one parameter we are calling. Then when you go for the third one, we are passing 2. y1 is the name and age is 25. So it is going to call this one. So y1 is storing in name, 25 is storing a year, and that will be getting initialized to the instance variables. Now, the objects are std1, std2, and std3. Now you're printing the value for std1. So you write std1.display. When you write std1.display, what all values you have stored for std1? std1 is implying what? No argument constructor. So no argument constructor value is what? Unknown and 0. That is your answer. Then second one, std2.display. You can see std2 is giving only x1. So it goes for this. The name is x1 and age is 0. You are going to get the answer. Now coming to the third one, std3, where y1 and 25 has been given, and you are calling std3.display. Then here you are getting y1 and 25 as an answer. So these are the expected answers. We'll see and run. Okay, so here again you need to save properly. Just file and save and run. Now here you can see std1 unknown and 0, std2 x1 only one parameter, no, and the age is by default 0 we are given. std3 we are given 2 values, one is y1 and 25. Okay, so whenever you are applying multiple constructors inside a class with various parameters, then that concept is called as constructor overloading. So I hope I've given some inputs onto the what is a constructor, the types of constructors and constructor overloading. If you like this particular video, please share and subscribe. Thank you.